When I walked into that courtroom in Phoenix last Tuesday, I never imagined I'd hear another woman claim she was my daughter's real mother right in front of the judge. What happened next changed everything I thought I knew about custody battles. I'd love to know which corner of the globe you're watching from. And if this story speaks to you, make sure to subscribe. Tomorrow's video is one you absolutely can't miss. My name is Diane Walsh, and this nightmare started 18 months ago when my ex-husband Marcus remarried. We'd been divorced for 3 years by then, sharing custody of our 8-year-old daughter Emma fairly peacefully. Marcus would pick her up every other weekend and one evening during the week. It wasn't perfect, but Emma seemed happy with the arrangement, and Marcus was actually a decent father when he bothered to show up. Everything shifted when Veronica entered the picture. She was a 28-year-old marketing coordinator at his accounting firm, 7 years younger than both Marcus and me. At first, I was cautiously optimistic. Emma needed stability, and if Marcus was serious about someone, maybe this woman could provide that. I was wrong about everything. The first red flag appeared during Emma's school play in October. I was sitting in the auditorium at Maplewood Elementary, saving a seat for Marcus like we'd agreed. When he arrived, Veronica was practically glued to his side, wearing this oversized smile that felt performative. She introduced herself to every other parent within earshot as Emma's stepmom before they'd even gotten engaged. Emma had known her for exactly 6 weeks. After the play, while Emma was changing out of her costume, Veronica cornered me by the refreshment table. She had this saccharine tone that immediately put me on edge. "Diane, we really need to establish some boundaries about Emma's upbringing," she said, stirring her coffee with unnecessary force. "Marcus and I have been discussing consistency between households, and frankly, some of your parenting choices are confusing her." I nearly choked on my punch. "Excuse me?" "Well, for instance, you let her stay up until 9:30 on school nights. We have her in bed by 8:15 sharp. And don't get me started on the sugar content in those lunchboxes you pack." This woman had been dating my ex-husband for barely 2 months and was already critiquing how I raised my daughter. I kept my voice level, mainly because we were surrounded by other parents, but inside I was seething. "Veronica, I appreciate your concern, but Emma and I have our routine figured out. If Marcus has specific issues with our custody arrangement, he can discuss them with me directly." She laughed, this condescending little laugh that made my skin crawl. "Oh, honey, I think you misunderstand. I'm not just some girlfriend anymore. Emma needs a mother figure who's actually present in her day-to-day life, not someone who's working 60-hour weeks and leaving her with babysitters." That hit below the belt. I'd been working extra shifts at the medical center specifically to afford Emma's dance classes and summer camp. Every decision I made was for her benefit, and this virtual stranger was questioning my dedication as a mother. The situation escalated rapidly after Marcus proposed to Veronica in December. Suddenly, every pickup and drop-off became an opportunity for her to insert herself into conversations about Emma's schedule, her grades, her friends, even her hairstyle. When I mentioned Emma's pediatrician appointment, Veronica suggested they should find her a new doctor closer to their house in Scottsdale. When Emma expressed interest in switching from ballet to soccer, Veronica immediately signed her up for a league without consulting me first. "She's going to be living with us half the time anyway," Veronica explained when I confronted her about the soccer registration. "It makes sense for her activities to be convenient for our household, too." But it was the wedding planning that really revealed Veronica's true intentions. Emma came home from a weekend visit in January, bubbling with excitement about being the flower girl. She described the dress, the ceremony venue, the reception details. Everything sounded lovely until she mentioned something that made my blood run cold. Veronica said after the wedding, I should start calling her Mom, Emma announced while I was helping her with homework. She said it would be less confusing since I'll have 2 moms who love me. I set down my pencil carefully, trying to process what I just heard. "Sweetheart, what do you think about that idea?" Emma shrugged, focused on her math problems. "I guess it's okay. Veronica said lots of kids have bonus moms, and she's going to take really good care of me."
The phrase bonus mom was obviously coached. 8-year-olds don't naturally use terminology like that. I could practically hear Veronica's voice behind Emma's words, and it made me nauseated. I called Marcus that evening after Emma went to bed. He answered on the fourth ring, sounding distracted. Marcus, we need to talk about Veronica encouraging Emma to call her mom. That's completely inappropriate. Look, Diane, nobody's trying to replace you, but Veronica's going to be Emma's stepmother, and if Emma feels comfortable calling her mom, what's the harm? The harm is that I'm her mother. I carried her for 9 months, I was in labor for 14 hours, I've been her primary parent since our divorce. Some woman you've known for 8 months doesn't get to claim that title just because you're putting a ring on her finger. Marcus sighed heavily. You're being dramatic. Veronica loves Emma, and Emma loves her back. Isn't that what matters?
What matters is respect for boundaries and our co-parenting relationship. Veronica is overstepping, and you're enabling it. The conversation went nowhere. Marcus accused me of being jealous and possessive. I accused him of being spineless and allowing his fiancée to manipulate our daughter. We hung up more frustrated with each other than we'd been since the divorce proceedings. Things continued deteriorating through the spring. Emma started making comments about how much cleaner Veronica kept the house, how much better she cooked, how much more fun their weekend activities were. I realized Veronica was systematically undermining me in subtle ways, probably without Emma even recognizing it. The breaking point came in May, during Emma's end-of-year school conference. I'd scheduled the meeting with Mrs. Patterson, Emma's third-grade teacher, to discuss her progress and summer reading goals. When I arrived at the classroom, Marcus was already there, with Veronica. Mrs. Patterson looked confused as we all settled into the tiny plastic chairs around her desk. I was expecting Emma's parents, she said diplomatically. I'm Emma's stepmother, Veronica announced, extending her hand. Well, I will be officially next month after the wedding, but I've been very involved in her education this year. This was news to me. Emma had never mentioned Veronica helping with homework or attending any school events besides that one play. During the conference, Veronica dominated the conversation. She asked about Emma's reading level, her social development, and her behavior in class. She took notes in a leather portfolio and nodded seriously at Mrs. Patterson's responses. When the teacher mentioned Emma occasionally seemed tired on Monday mornings, Veronica shot me a pointed look. She probably stays up too late on Sunday nights, Veronica said. We've noticed she has trouble adjusting to different household rules. I felt my face flush. Emma's bedtime routine is perfectly appropriate for her age. Maybe we should establish more consistency, Marcus interjected, for Emma's benefit. The meeting ended with Veronica scheduling a follow-up conference for the fall, identifying herself as Emma's primary contact for school communications. I left feeling like I'd been ambushed by a coordinated attack on my parenting. That weekend, Emma came home from their house with a new haircut. Veronica had taken her to an expensive salon in Scottsdale and chopped off the long curls Emma had been growing for 2 years. When I expressed surprise, Emma defended the decision enthusiastically. Veronica said short hair would be easier to manage for summer swimming, and she said I look more mature now, like a big girl. Looking at my daughter's drastically different appearance, I realized this wasn't just about hair. It was about control, about marking territory, about gradually erasing my influence and replacing it with Veronica's vision of who Emma should become. I made an appointment with a family attorney the following Monday. The law office of Patricia Hernandez was nothing like what I'd expected. Located in a modern glass building downtown, it felt more like a therapist's office than a place where custody battles were planned. Patricia herself was a no-nonsense woman in her 50s, with silver-streaked hair and kind eyes that somehow managed to look fierce when she concentrated. "Tell me everything," she said, sliding a legal pad across her mahogany desk. "Start from the beginning and don't leave out details that might seem minor. In custody cases, it's often the small things that matter most." I spent 2 hours walking Patricia through every incident, every conversation, every subtle manipulation I'd witnessed. She took meticulous notes, occasionally asking clarifying questions that made me realize I'd been documenting this behavior subconsciously for months.
Has Emma expressed any preferences about the living arrangement? Patricia asked. She seems happy with both households, but lately she's been mentioning how organized everything is at her father's place. Veronica's been systematically positioning herself as the more competent parent figure. Patricia nodded grimly. Classic alienation tactics. The good news is that Arizona courts prioritize the child's best interests, not a new spouse's desire to play house. The concerning news is that your ex-husband's allowing this behavior suggests he might support a custody modification. My stomach dropped. You think they'll try to change our arrangement? I think you need to be prepared for that possibility. Document everything from now on. Every conversation, every incident, every time Emma comes home with stories about what Veronica said or did. Get a composition notebook and write everything down with dates and times. That evening, I started what I privately called my Veronica file. The first entry was about Emma mentioning that Veronica had rearranged her bedroom at Marcus's house without asking what Emma preferred. Small thing, but it fit the pattern of control Patricia had warned me about. Marcus and Veronica's wedding was a lavish affair at the Phoenician resort in June. Eva looked beautiful in her flower girl dress, but watching her walk down the aisle scattering rose petals, I felt like I was witnessing something ominous rather than celebratory. During the reception, multiple guests approached me to comment on how natural Veronica looked with Emma, how they made such a perfect little family. A lot of love and effort went into bringing this story to life. If you're enjoying it, we'd be so grateful if you'd subscribe to our channel. Now, back to where we left off. The most disturbing moment came during the mother-son dance. Veronica had orchestrated a surprise where Emma joined them halfway through the song, creating this touching tableau of their new family unit. The photographer captured dozens of shots while I sat at my assigned table, feeling like an outsider at my own daughter's celebration. After the honeymoon, things shifted into overdrive. Veronica officially changed her name to Veronica Walsh and immediately began introducing herself as Emma's mom to everyone they encountered. At the grocery store, at dance class pickup, at neighborhood gatherings, she'd completely dropped the step prefix. Emma started coming home with stories about their weekend adventures that sounded more like carefully curated Instagram posts than natural family time. The Phoenix Zoo, hiking at Camelback Mountain, pottery painting in Old Town Scottsdale, always with professional quality photos that Veronica posted on social media with captions like, "Making memories with my beautiful daughter." The social media aspect particularly bothered me. Veronica had created this public narrative where she was Emma's devoted mother, sharing milestone moments and daily activities as if she'd been present for Emma's entire life. Mutual acquaintances started commenting on how lucky Emma was to have such an involved mom, clearly not realizing they were praising the woman who'd been in Emma's life for less than a year. In August, Emma mentioned that Veronica had scheduled her annual physical without consulting me. When I called the pediatrician's office to inquire, they informed me that Veronica Walsh had presented herself as Emma's mother and provided all the necessary insurance information. "She's not Emma's legal guardian," I explained to the receptionist. "I need to be notified about all medical appointments." "I'm sorry for the confusion, Mrs. Walsh. The woman who made the appointment had the same last name as the patient and seemed very familiar with Emma's medical history. We assumed she was the mother." This was exactly what Patricia had warned me about. Veronica was systematically inserting herself into official capacities, creating a paper trail that suggested she held parental authority. I called Marcus immediately. "Your wife scheduled Emma's doctor appointment without telling me. That's completely unacceptable." "Veronica's just being proactive. She noticed Emma was due for her checkup and handled it. I don't see the problem." "The problem is that I'm Emma's mother, and medical decisions go through me. Veronica has no legal right to make appointments or access Emma's health information." "She's Emma's stepmother, and she lives in our house half the time. Of course she has the right to handle routine medical care." "No, Marcus, she doesn't. Check with your lawyer if you need clarification, but stepmothers don't automatically get parental rights just because they're married to the biological parent." The conversation escalated quickly. Marcus accused me of being controlling and making Veronica feel unwelcome in Emma's life. I accused him of allowing his wife to overstep legal boundaries. We ended up shouting at each other over the phone like teenagers. That weekend, Emma came home with news that made my blood pressure spike. Veronica had taken her to get a library card at the Scottsdale branch, listing herself as Emma's parent on the application. She'd also signed Emma up for a summer reading program and volunteered to be the parent helper for their weekly activities. Veronica said it would be easier if I had a library card near their house, Emma explained while unpacking her backpack, and she's going to help with the reading program every Tuesday. She said she's excited to be involved in my education. I stared at the library card with Veronica Walsh listed as the parent contact. This wasn't just boundary crossing anymore. This was deliberate identity theft of my parental status. The final straw came in September, during Emma's school registration for 4th grade. I'd filled out all the paperwork online, listing myself as the primary contact and Marcus as secondary. When I went to the school to drop off Emma's supplies, the secretary handed me a corrected form. Mrs. Walsh came in yesterday to update Emma's emergency contacts, she explained. She mentioned there were some errors in the online registration. I looked at the paper with growing horror. Veronica had changed the primary contact information to herself, listed her cell phone as the main number, and added a note requesting that all school communications go through her since she was more available during school hours. There's been a mistake, I told the secretary. I'm Emma Walsh's mother. Veronica is her stepmother. All school communications should come through me. The secretary looked confused and slightly embarrassed. I'm so sorry. The woman who came in yesterday said she was Emma's mom and that the father worked long hours. She seemed very knowledgeable about Emma's schedule and academic needs. This was the moment I realized Veronica's strategy was working. To outside observers, she appeared to be the more present, involved parent. Her full-time availability and detailed knowledge of Emma's routines made her seem like the natural primary contact, while I looked like the absent parent trying to maintain control from the sidelines. I drove straight to Patricia's office from the school. She took one look at my face and cleared her afternoon schedule.
She's systematically replacing me, I said, spreading the library card and school forms across her desk. And Emma's starting to see her as the default parent because she's always available, always volunteering, always handling the details. Patricia studied the documents carefully. This is more aggressive than typical step-parent overreach. She's creating an official record that positions her as Emma's primary caregiver. Has Marcus said anything about modifying custody? Not directly, but I think it's coming. Emma mentioned that Veronica thinks she'd be happier with more consistency in her routine. We need to act first, Patricia said decisively. I'm going to file a motion to clarify parental roles and responsibilities. We need the court to establish clear boundaries about what Veronica can and cannot do regarding Emma's care. As I left her office that afternoon, I felt like I was preparing for war. Veronica had been playing chess while I'd been playing checkers, systematically positioning herself to claim my role as Emma's mother, but I wasn't going to let that happen without a fight. The court papers arrived on a Tuesday morning in October, delivered by a process server who looked apologetic as he handed me the manila envelope. My hands shook as I read the heading, Petition for Modification of Custody and Parenting Time, Walsh v. Walsh. Marcus was seeking primary custody of Emma. I called Patricia immediately, barely able to speak through my panic. They beat us to it. Marcus filed first. Come in right now, she said. Bring the documents. An hour later, I sat in Patricia's office while she reviewed Marcus's petition with the focused intensity of a surgeon examining x-rays. The papers painted a picture of me as an absent, workaholic mother who prioritized career over child, while positioning Veronica as a stable, nurturing parental figure who provided Emma with the consistency she needed. They're arguing that Emma's best interests would be served by living primarily with her father and stepmother, Patricia explained. They claim you work excessive hours, frequently use babysitters, and that Emma has expressed preference for the structured environment at their home. That's all twisted truth, I said. I work to support Emma. The babysitter there for evening shifts when she's already asleep. And of course, their house seems more structured. Veronica doesn't work and can dedicate all her time to managing Emma's schedule.
The concerning part is this affidavit from Emma's dance instructor, Patricia continued, sliding another document across the desk. She states that Veronica has been the one picking up Emma from classes and handling all communications about recitals and costume fittings. I stared at the dance teacher's sworn statement. Miss Rodriguez described Veronica as extremely involved and knowledgeable about Emma's progress, while noting that she rarely interacted with Emma's biological mother. The implication was clear. In the eyes of Emma's extracurricular activities, Veronica appeared to be the primary parent. There's more, Patricia said grimly. They have statements from Emma's school secretary, her pediatrician's office, and the Scottsdale Library, all describing interactions with Veronica in a maternal capacity. My throat felt tight. She planned this. Every appointment, every volunteer opportunity, every interaction was building toward this moment. It appears so, but we have strengths they don't expect. Your employment records show you've never missed work due to irresponsibility. You've only taken time off for Emma's illnesses and school events. Your bank statements prove you've prioritized Emma's needs, funding her activities and education. And most importantly, you've been Emma's primary parent since birth. Patricia outlined our counter-strategy. We would file a response highlighting my 8 years as devoted mother, document Veronica's systematic boundary violations, and request a guardian ad litem to represent Emma's interests independently. The key is showing the court that this isn't about what's best for Emma, it's about Veronica's desire to replace you, Patricia explained. Judges don't like parental alienation, especially when it's orchestrated by a new spouse. Over the next few weeks, I threw myself into building our case. I gathered photographs from every birthday party, school event, and milestone moment I'd shared with Emma. I collected cards she'd made me, artwork with "I love Mom" scrawled in crayon, and videos of her talking about our weekend adventures. The evidence painted a picture of a close, loving mother-daughter relationship that predated Veronica's existence by 8 years. The most difficult part was explaining the situation to Emma without poisoning her relationship with her father. During one of our regular bedtime conversations, she mentioned that Veronica had been asking her questions about our house, our routines, and whether she felt safe and happy with me. "What did you tell her?" I asked, trying to keep my voice casual. "I said I love living with you, but I also loved their house because it's bigger, and Veronica always has healthy snacks prepared," Emma replied innocently. "Veronica said it's important for me to think about what makes me happiest." These weren't innocent conversations. Veronica was coaching Emma to evaluate and compare her living situations, planting seeds of dissatisfaction with our home while highlighting the advantages of theirs. The court-appointed guardian ad litem was a stern woman named Margaret Chen who specialized in child advocacy. She spent an hour interviewing me in Patricia's office, asking detailed questions about my parenting philosophy, work schedule, and relationship with Emma. "What's your biggest concern about the proposed custody change?" Miss Chen asked. "That it's not really about Emma's welfare. It's about Veronica's need to validate her role by diminishing mine. Emma doesn't need a custody change. She needs adults who can co-parent respectfully without letting ego and territory battles affect her stability." Miss Chen made notes without revealing her impressions. She scheduled separate interviews with Marcus, Veronica, and Emma herself. Meanwhile, the legal proceedings created an increasingly tense atmosphere during custody exchanges. Marcus had grown cold and formal, treating me like an adversary rather than his daughter's mother. Veronica accompanied him to every pickup and drop-off, standing slightly behind him with this satisfied expression that made my skin crawl. During one particularly awkward exchange, Emma ran to get her forgotten homework folder while Marcus and I waited by his car. Veronica took the opportunity to address me directly. "I hope you understand this isn't personal, Diane," she said with false sweetness. "We're just thinking about Emma's long-term stability. She needs consistency, and frankly, your work schedule doesn't allow for the kind of attention a growing girl requires." My work schedule has never interfered with Emma's needs, I replied evenly. I've been successfully balancing motherhood and career for 8 years. But wouldn't it be better if she didn't have to balance anything? If she could just focus on being a child while the adults handle everything? Veronica's smile never wavered. I'm in a position to give her that gift: full-time attention, structured routines, proper nutrition, educational support, everything a mother should provide. The word mother hung in the air between us like a challenge. Veronica was laying claim to my title openly now, no longer bothering with pretense. Emma emerged from the house with her folder, breaking the tension. As they drove away, I watched my daughter through the back window, chattering excitedly to Veronica about something I couldn't hear. The preliminary hearing was scheduled for December. Patricia warned me it would primarily focus on scheduling expert evaluations and establishing temporary arrangements while the full case proceeded. But when we arrived at the Maricopa County Family Court, I wasn't prepared for the emotional impact of seeing Emma's future debated like a business transaction. Judge Rebecca Martinez was a middle-aged Latina woman with sharp eyes and an efficient demeanor. She listened to both attorneys present their positions with professional detachment, occasionally asking clarifying questions about scheduling and documentation. Marcus's lawyer, a sleek man named David Brennan, painted me as a well-intentioned but overwhelmed single mother who had become too dependent on external childcare. He emphasized Veronica's availability, education background, and natural maternal instincts with Emma. Your Honor, Mrs. Veronica Walsh has seamlessly integrated into Emma's life, providing stability and nurturing that complements Mr. Walsh's involvement. The child has thrived under this arrangement, and her academic and social development reflect the benefits of a two-parent household where one parent can dedicate full-time attention to her needs. Patricia countered by emphasizing my history as Emma's primary caregiver and questioning the motivation behind the custody modification request. Your Honor, Miss Walsh has been Emma's devoted mother for 8 years, successfully managing both her career responsibilities and her parental duties. This petition appears less concerned with Emma's welfare and more focused on validating the new stepmother's role at the expense of the biological mother's established relationship. Judge Martinez ordered psychological evaluations for all parties and a home study of both residences. She also appointed Dr. Sarah Kim, a child psychologist, to conduct a comprehensive assessment of Emma's adjustment and preferences. I want to be clear, Judge Martinez said, looking directly at both legal teams. This court's primary concern is Emma's best interests, not the adults' competing claims to parental authority. Any evidence of coaching, manipulation, or attempts to influence this child's testimony will be viewed very unfavorably. As we left the courthouse, I felt like I'd just fired the opening shot in a war I never wanted to fight. But Veronica had made it clear she intended to claim my daughter as her own, and I wasn't going to surrender without exhausting every legal option available. The psychological evaluation with Dr. Sarah Kim took place in a beige office that smelled like lavender and felt designed to put people at ease. Dr. Kim was a petite woman with graying hair and the kind of calm presence that made you want to confess your deepest fears within minutes of meeting her. "Tell me about your relationship with Emma," she began, settling into her chair with a notepad balanced on her knee. For the next 2 hours, I walked Dr. Kim through 8 years of motherhood. The sleepless nights when Emma had colic, teaching her to ride a bike in our neighborhood park, helping with homework at the kitchen table, bedtime stories that evolved from picture books to chapter novels. I shared videos on my phone of Emma's first words, first steps, first day of school, all the moments that Veronica could never claim because she simply wasn't there. "How would you describe Emma's adjustment to your ex-husband?" Dr. Kim asked.
Initially positive. Emma seemed happy that her father had found someone who made him smile more. But over time, I've noticed Veronica positioning herself as a replacement rather than an addition to Emma's support system. I explained the systematic boundary violations, the identity replacement tactics, the subtle ways Veronica had been coaching Emma to compare households. Dr. Kim took detailed notes, occasionally asking for specific examples or timeline clarifications. Has Emma expressed any direct preferences about living arrangements? She's mentioned enjoying the organization at her father's house, but I suspect those comments have been influenced by leading questions. Emma's always been adaptable. She finds positive aspects in any situation because that's her nature. A week later, Dr. Kim conducted her evaluation with Marcus and Veronica together. I wasn't present, obviously, but Emma later mentioned some of the activities they'd done, drawing pictures of their family, playing with dollhouse figures, answering questions about daily routines. It sounded innocent enough, but I wondered how Veronica had presented herself during the session. The home study coordinator, Janet Phillips, visited my house on a cold January morning. She was a thorough woman who examined everything from the contents of my refrigerator to Emma's bedroom organization. We sat at my dining table while she asked questions about daily schedules, discipline strategies, and emergency procedures. "Walk me through a typical school day," Janet requested. I described our morning routine, breakfast together, reviewing Emma's backpack, driving her to school while listening to her favorite playlist. After work, I picked her up from the after-school program, helped with homework while preparing dinner, then spent the evening engaged in whatever activity Emma chose: crafts, reading, watching movies, practicing dance routines in the living room. "What about weekends when Emma's with you?" "We usually start with pancakes and plan the day together. Sometimes we visit my parents in Tempe, go to the zoo, have friend playdates, or just hang out at home. Emma likes having input into our activities rather than following a rigid schedule." Janet made notes about everything: the family photos covering my refrigerator, Emma's artwork displayed on the hallway walls, the bookshelf full of children's literature in her room. She seemed particularly interested in a bulletin board where Emma had pinned certificates from school, dance recital programs, and photos with friends. "Emma appears very comfortable here," Janet observed. "How long has she lived in this house?" "Since she was 4. We moved here after the divorce because I wanted her to have stability and continuity. Same neighborhood, same school district, same pediatrician. Everything is familiar." 2 weeks later, Janet visited Marcus and Veronica's house in Scottsdale. Emma described it afterward with enthusiasm that made my heart sink. "Janet loved Veronica's organization system," Emma reported while we folded laundry together. "She has color-coded calendars for everyone's schedules and a whole binder with my school information and medical records. And you should see my room there. Veronica helped me arrange everything perfectly with matching storage containers." I forced a smile while internally screaming. Of course Veronica's house looked like a Pinterest board. She had unlimited time and resources to create the perfect domestic environment, while I was juggling work responsibilities with single parenthood. "Did Janet ask you any questions about what you prefer?" I asked carefully. "She asked which house felt more like home, but I told her I love both places for different reasons. This house has all my memories and feels cozy, but their house has more space and everything is really organized." Emma's diplomatic answer revealed her natural desire to avoid hurting anyone's feelings, but I wondered how it would be interpreted by the evaluators. The custody trial was scheduled for March, but developments in February changed everything. Emma came home from a weekend visit with news that made my stomach drop. "Veronica's going to homeschool me next year," she announced while unpacking her overnight bag. "She said I'm smart enough to work ahead of my grade level, and she used to be a teacher before she met Daddy." This was the first I'd heard about Veronica's teaching background. More importantly, it was the first mention of homeschooling, which would effectively eliminate any outside perspective on Emma's daily life and put her completely under Veronica's control. I called Patricia immediately. "They're planning to homeschool Emma. That can't be legal without my consent." "It's not, but it shows their long-term strategy. They're planning to isolate Emma from external influences that might contradict their narrative." "Can we use this in court?" "Absolutely. It demonstrates that this custody change isn't about Emma's current needs, it's about reshaping her entire future according to Veronica's vision." The final custody hearing took place on a rainy Tuesday in March. The courtroom was smaller than I'd expected, with fluorescent lighting that made everyone look pale and tired. Judge Martinez presented with the same professional demeanor she'd shown during the preliminary hearing. Dr. Kim testified first, presenting her psychological evaluations with clinical precision.
She described me as a committed, loving mother with appropriate boundaries and real
expectations for her daughter's development. Marcus was characterized as well-intentioned but somewhat passive in parenting decisions, while Veronica was noted as highly invested in the child's welfare but potentially over-invested in establishing maternal authority. In your professional opinion, what custody arrangement would serve Emma's best interests? Patricia asked. Emma benefits from the stability and continuity of her current arrangement, Dr. Kim replied. While she has adapted well to her father's household, there's no evidence that a custody modification would improve her emotional or developmental outcomes. In fact, disrupting her primary residence could create unnecessary stress during a crucial developmental period. Janet Phillips testified about her home study findings. She praised both households but noted important distinctions. Ms. Walsh's home reflects years of shared history with Emma. The environment is child-centered and emotionally warm. Mr. Walsh's home is beautifully organized and well-resourced, but it feels more adult-oriented despite accommodations for Emma's presence. David Brennan, Marcus's attorney, called several witnesses to support their case. Emma's dance instructor testified about Veronica's involvement, though Patricia's cross-examination revealed that I had been the one enrolling Emma in classes and paying fees for 3 years before Veronica appeared. The school secretary described her interactions with Veronica, but admitted under questioning that she had been confused about family relationships and had made assumptions based on shared last names rather than actual legal authority. Veronica herself took the stand with confidence that bordered on arrogance. She wore a navy blue suit that made her look professional and maternal simultaneously. "I love Emma as if she were my own daughter," she testified. "I've dedicated myself to providing her with the stability and attention every child deserves. My flexibility allows me to be present for every school event, every doctor's appointment, every moment when she needs support." When Patricia cross-examined her, Veronica's composure began to crack. "Ms. Walsh, is it true you've introduced yourself to various professionals as Emma's mother rather than stepmother?" "I consider myself Emma's mother in every meaningful sense." "But you're not her legal mother, are you?" "Legal titles don't define love and commitment." "Did you consult with Emma's actual mother before scheduling medical appointments?" "I was handling routine care for a child living in my household." "Did you have legal authority to access Emma's medical records?" Veronica hesitated. "I was acting in Emma's best interests." "That wasn't the question, Ms. Walsh. Did you have legal authority?" "I had my husband's permission." "Which doesn't grant you parental rights, does it?" The exchange continued for 20 minutes, with Patricia systematically dismantling her claims to maternal authority. By the end, Veronica looked flustered and defensive rather than confident and nurturing. When I testified, I focused on my 8-year history with Emma and my commitment to co-parenting respectfully with Marcus. I acknowledged Veronica's positive relationship with Emma while firmly establishing my role as Emma's mother. "I've never tried to prevent Veronica from having a meaningful relationship with Emma," I told the court, "but I won't stand by while she systematically attempts to replace me or confuse my daughter about who her mother is." The trial concluded with closing arguments that felt like competing visions of Emma's future. Marcus's team painted a picture of nuclear family stability with full-time maternal attention. Our team emphasized continuity, established relationships, and the dangers of rewarding parental alienation tactics. Judge Martinez announced she would issue her ruling within 2 weeks. The 2 weeks waiting for Judge Martinez's decision felt like suspended animation. I threw myself into work at the medical center, picking up extra shifts to keep my mind occupied. But every quiet moment brought a wave of anxiety about Emma's future. She seemed oblivious to the gravity of the situation, chattering about spring break plans and her upcoming dance recital as if our world wasn't hanging in the balance. Patricia called on a Thursday afternoon while I was reviewing patient charts. The ruling came in. Judge Martinez wants all parties in court tomorrow at 2 o'clock. "Can you tell anything from the timing or format?" I asked, my voice barely steady.
Custody decisions are always read in person, but Diane, whatever happens tomorrow, know that we presented the strongest possible case. The evidence was clear, and your testimony was compelling. That night, I barely slept. I kept replaying moments from the trial, wondering if I'd said the right things, if Patricia had pushed hard enough, if the judge had seen through Veronica's performance. At 4 in the morning, I gave up on sleep and sat in Emma's doorway.
Watching her peaceful face in the dim light from the hallway. The thought of losing daily access to these quiet moments made my chest tight with panic. Emma was at school when I arrived at the courthouse the next afternoon. Marcus and Veronica sat on the opposite side of the gallery, both dressed in conservative dark suits that projected respectability and competence. Veronica caught my eye once and offered a small, confident smile that made my blood run cold. She clearly expected to win. Judge Martinez entered with the same professional demeanor she'd maintained throughout the proceedings, but I thought I detected a slight tension in her posture as she settled behind the bench. This case has required careful consideration of complex family dynamics and competing claims about a child's best interests, she began, consulting the papers before her. The court has reviewed all testimony, expert evaluations, and documentary evidence presented by both parties. My heart hammered against my ribs as she continued. Mr. Walsh and Mrs. Veronica Walsh argue that Emma would benefit from the stability of a two-parent household where one parent can provide full-time attention and structured care. They've presented evidence of Mrs. Veronica Walsh's involvement in Emma's daily life and her commitment to the child's welfare. I felt sick. This sounded like the opening to a ruling in their favor. However, Judge Martinez continued, and that single word shifted the entire atmosphere in the courtroom. The court has serious concerns about the motivations behind this custody modification request and the methods used to support it. Veronica's confident expression faltered slightly. The evidence shows a systematic pattern of boundary violations by Mrs. Veronica Walsh, who has consistently overstepped appropriate step-parent roles and attempted to assume parental authority without legal standing. Her actions in scheduling medical appointments, changing school contacts, and presenting herself as Emma's mother to various professionals demonstrate a concerning disregard for established parental rights. Patricia squeezed my hand under the table as Judge Martinez's words continued. While Mrs. Veronica Walsh's dedication to Emma is apparent, her approach has been inappropriate and potentially harmful to the child's understanding of family relationships. The court is particularly troubled by evidence suggesting systematic coaching designed to influence Emma's perception of her living arrangements. Marcus's attorney, David Brennan, looked like he was watching his case collapse in real time. Dr. Kim's psychological evaluation clearly indicates that Emma has a strong, healthy attachment to her mother, Miss Diane Walsh, who has been her primary caregiver since birth. There is no evidence that Emma's current living arrangement is detrimental to her welfare or development. In fact, disrupting this established relationship would likely cause unnecessary emotional distress. Judge Martinez paused, looking directly at Veronica. The court finds Mrs. Veronica Walsh's claim that she is Emma's real mother to be legally baseless and emotionally manipulative. Step-parents can play valuable supportive roles in children's lives without undermining or replacing biological parents. Mrs. Veronica's inability to respect these boundaries raises questions about her suitability as a primary caregiver. Veronica's face had gone pale, and I could see her hands clenched tightly in her lap. Furthermore, the proposal to homeschool Emma appears designed to limit external oversight of the child's welfare and isolate her from perspectives that might contradict the stepmother's narrative. This court will not facilitate such isolation. Judge Martinez's voice grew firmer as she delivered her final ruling. The petition for custody modification is denied. Emma will continue to reside primarily with her mother, Miss Diane Walsh, with continued parenting time for Mr. Walsh as previously established. However, given the evidence of boundary violations and potential parental alienation, this court is imposing additional conditions. She outlined a series of restrictions that made Veronica's face grow progressively more strained. All medical appointments required my consent or court order. School communications must go through me as the primary contact. Veronica was prohibited from introducing herself as Emma's mother to any professionals or institutions. Most significantly, both Marcus and Veronica were required to attend co-parenting counseling to address appropriate step-parent boundaries. Any future violations of these conditions will result in a review of Mr. Walsh's parenting time, Judge Martinez concluded. This court expects all parties to prioritize Emma's emotional well-being over adult territorial disputes. As the gavel fell, I felt a rush of relief so intense it made me dizzy. Patricia was beaming beside me, gathering papers with the satisfied efficiency of someone who just won a complex chess match. Across the aisle, Marcus looked stunned, while Veronica appeared to be struggling with some combination of rage and disbelief. As we filed out of the courtroom, she stopped me in the hallway. "This isn't over," she said quietly, her earlier saccharine demeanor completely gone. "Emma knows who really takes care of her. Court decisions can't change that." "Actually, they can," I replied calmly, "and they just did. Emma has one mother, Veronica. You can either accept that and build a healthy step-parent relationship, or you can continue this behavior and risk losing access to her entirely."
She stalked away without another word, leaving Marcus to trail behind her like a confused puppy. That evening, I picked Emma up from after-school care with a lightness in my chest that I hadn't felt in months. She chattered about her day during the drive home, completely unaware that her future had just been decided in a downtown courtroom. "Mom, Veronica asked me yesterday if I would be sad if I couldn't live with you anymore," Emma mentioned casually while we prepared dinner. "I told her that would make me very sad because you're my mom and I love our house." "What did she say to that?" "She said sometimes kids have to make difficult choices about what's best for them, but I don't understand why I would have to choose. I love you and I love Daddy and I even love Veronica. Can't I just keep loving everyone?" I hugged her tightly, grateful that her 8-year-old wisdom had cut through all the adult manipulation and legal maneuvering to reach the simple truth. You absolutely can keep loving everyone, sweetheart, and nobody's going to make you choose between people you care about. Over the following months, the court-ordered counseling slowly improved the situation. Marcus began asserting more authority in his own household, setting boundaries that Veronica clearly resented but was forced to respect. The sessions helped him understand how his passivity had enabled Veronica's overreach and put Emma in an uncomfortable position. Veronica still struggled with the limitations on her role, but the threat of reduced visitation kept her behavior in check. She began introducing herself as Emma's stepmother again, though I could tell it physically pained her to acknowledge the distinction. Emma, resilient as children often are, adapted to the clearer boundaries without apparent difficulty. She still enjoyed her time with Marcus and Veronica, but she stopped making comparisons between households or repeating coaching statements about consistency and organization. The most satisfying moment came 6 months later, during Emma's 5th-grade graduation ceremony. As I watched my daughter cross the stage to receive her certificate, I noticed Veronica in the audience with Marcus. When the principal announced Emma's academic achievements, Veronica applauded enthusiastically. But when another parent complimented her on her daughter's success, I heard Veronica correct them. "Thank you, but I'm her stepmother. Her mother is right over there." It was a small acknowledgement, but it represented everything the custody battle had really been about: recognition that loving a child doesn't grant you the right to erase their actual parent or rewrite their history. As we celebrated Emma's graduation that evening with pizza and ice cream, I reflected on how close I'd come to losing the daily privilege of being her mother. Veronica's systematic campaign had been sophisticated and nearly successful, but ultimately the legal system had protected the fundamental bond between Emma and me. Emma fell asleep that night with her graduation certificate on her nightstand and her arms wrapped around the stuffed elephant I'd given her as a baby.
Looking at her peaceful face, I knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, she would always know who her real mother was. Not because a court had declared it, but because 8 years of love, consistency, and sacrifice had made it an unshakable truth. 3 years after the custody battle ended, I thought we'd finally achieved the stability everyone claimed to want for Emma. She was thriving in 7th grade, excelling at advanced math classes, and had just made the competitive dance team at her middle school. The court-ordered boundaries with Veronica had held, and while our co-parenting relationship with Marcus remained somewhat strained, it was functional. That's why the phone call from Emma's school counselor on a Wednesday afternoon in November caught me completely off guard. "Ms. Walsh, I'm calling about some concerning behavior Emma's been displaying lately," Mrs. Rodriguez explained. "She's been asking to visit my office during lunch periods, and yesterday she broke down crying when I asked if everything was okay at home." My stomach dropped. What did she say was wrong? She mentioned feeling confused about some family discussions happening at her father's house. "I think it would be beneficial if you could come in for a meeting. Is Emma aware of any major changes or decisions being made?" I assured Mrs. Rodriguez I'd be there the next morning, but my mind was racing. Emma hadn't mentioned any problems during our regular evening conversations. If anything, she'd seemed more relaxed lately, excited about the upcoming winter dance recital and a science project she was working on with her best friend. That evening, I approached the topic carefully while Emma worked on homework at the kitchen table. "Mrs. Rodriguez called today. She said you've been feeling upset about something at school. Want to talk about it?" Emma's pencil stilled, and she kept her eyes fixed on her math worksheet. "It's probably nothing, just some stuff Veronica's been saying." "What kind of stuff?" Emma finally looked up, and I could see the confusion and worry in her eyes that she'd been hiding. "She keeps asking me questions about you and Grandma and Grandpa, like whether I think you really want me around or if you're just stuck with me because of the court thing."
The blood rushed from my face. "Emma, sweetheart, you know that's not true, right? I fought so hard to keep you with me because I love you more than anything in this world." "I know that," Emma said quickly, "but Veronica says sometimes parents feel obligated to say things like that. She says now that I'm older, I should think about what I really want instead of just going along with what adults decide for me." This was exactly the kind of manipulation Judge Martinez had warned against, but Veronica was being more subtle now, planting seeds of doubt rather than making direct claims. "Has she suggested what she thinks you should want?" I asked carefully. Emma hesitated. "She thinks I'd be happier if I lived with them full-time. She says I could have my own bathroom and a bigger bedroom, and she could help me with my homework every night instead of you having to work late sometimes." The familiar rage began building in my chest, but I forced myself to stay calm for Emma's sake. "How do you feel about that idea?" "I don't want to hurt anyone's feelings," Emma said quietly. "I love our house and our traditions and movie nights with you, but I also like how organized everything is at Dad's house, and Veronica really does help with my science projects better than you do." Her honesty stung, but I appreciated that she felt safe enough to share these conflicting feelings with me. "It's okay to love different things about different places," I told her. "That doesn't mean you have to choose one or the other. You're allowed to enjoy the good parts of both homes." The next morning's meeting with Mrs. Rodriguez confirmed my suspicions. Emma had been asking increasingly mature questions about legal rights, whether courts ever change their minds about custody decisions, and what happened when kids turn 18 and could choose where to live. "These aren't typical concerns for a 12-year-old, Mrs. Rodriguez observed. "Someone's been introducing these concepts to her, and it's clearly causing anxiety about her family stability." I called Patricia immediately after the school meeting. "Veronica's starting again. She's being more careful this time, but she's definitely manipulating Emma." "What specific things has she said?" I relayed Emma's reports about the questions and suggestions. Patricia listened with the focused attention of someone taking mental notes for a legal strategy. "The challenging part is that she's not technically violating the court order. She's not introducing herself as Emma's mother or making medical decisions, but this psychological manipulation could constitute emotional abuse." "What are our options?" Document everything Emma tells you about these conversations. I'll file a motion to modify the co-parenting counseling requirements and request supervised visitation until Veronica demonstrates she can respect appropriate boundaries. That weekend was Emma's scheduled time with Marcus and Veronica. She left Friday evening with her usual overnight bag, but when Marcus dropped her off Sunday night, she seemed withdrawn and troubled. "How was your weekend, sweetheart?" I asked while she unpacked her clothes. "Okay, I guess. Veronica took me shopping for new clothes and kept saying how prettier I look in the outfits she picks out versus the ones you buy me." Emma paused, folding a sweater. "She also showed me pictures of high schools near their house and said I should think about which one looks more appealing for when I'm older." This was escalating beyond casual manipulation into active recruitment. Veronica was systematically undermining my parenting choices while positioning herself as the superior option for Emma's future. Monday morning brought another troubling development. I received an email from Emma's dance instructor asking about schedule changes for the winter recital. Emma's stepmother contacted me about potentially switching her to evening classes that would be more convenient for their household, Miss Jennifer wrote. She mentioned that Emma's primary residence might be changing soon, and they wanted to establish consistency with the new schedule. I called Miss Jennifer immediately. There are no plans to change Emma's living arrangement. Veronica doesn't have authority to make decisions about Emma's activities. "I'm so sorry for the confusion. She seemed very knowledgeable about Emma's schedule and said she was coordinating with you to make these changes." This was the same pattern from 4 years ago, but more sophisticated. Veronica was laying groundwork for a custody change by creating the appearance that one was already in progress. Patricia filed our motion the next day, but the court date wasn't scheduled for 3 weeks. Meanwhile, Emma's anxiety was becoming more apparent. She started having trouble sleeping, frequently asking questions about whether I would be angry if she ever wanted to live somewhere else, and showing less enthusiasm for activities she usually loved. The breaking point came on a Tuesday evening while we were making dinner together. Emma had been unusually quiet, stirring the pasta sauce with mechanical movements while staring at nothing. "Mom," she said suddenly, "Veronica says you only fought for custody because you wanted to hurt Dad, not because you actually wanted me."
I nearly dropped the pasta pot. "Emma, look at me." She turned, and I could see the doubt in her eyes that Veronica had carefully cultivated. "That is absolutely not true. I fought for custody because you are the most important thing in my life. Every decision I make, every sacrifice I've ever made has been because I love you and want what's best for you. Not to hurt your father, not because a court told me to, but because you are my daughter and I cannot imagine my life without you in it." Tears started rolling down Emma's cheeks. "But what if she's right about some things? What if you would be happier if you didn't have to worry about me all the time?" I pulled her into a fierce hug, my own tears starting. "Baby girl, worrying about you isn't a burden. It's what mothers do because we love our children. If something happened to you, if you weren't in my life, I would be lost. You are not something I'm stuck with. You are the reason I get up every morning." That night, after Emma fell asleep, I made a decision. This couldn't continue. Veronica's psychological manipulation was damaging Emma's sense of security and self-worth, and waiting for a court date wasn't protecting my daughter from ongoing harm. I called Patricia and asked her to request an emergency hearing based on emotional abuse and violation of the spirit, if not the letter, of the court's previous orders. Judge Martinez specifically warned against attempts to influence Emma's testimony or create confusion about family relationships, I reminded Patricia. That's exactly what Veronica's doing, just more subtly. The emergency hearing was granted for the following Friday. This time, when I walked into Judge Martinez's courtroom, I wasn't fighting for custody. I was fighting for my daughter's emotional well-being and our relationship that Veronica seemed determined to destroy. Judge Martinez looked visibly frustrated when she reviewed our motion. "Miss Walsh, this court specifically addressed boundary issues 3 years ago. What evidence do you have that these orders are being violated?" Patricia presented our documentation methodically. School counselor reports about Emma's anxiety, recorded conversations about Veronica's inappropriate questions, emails from dance instructors about unauthorized schedule changes. Most damning was a recording I'd made of Emma repeating Veronica's more manipulative statements verbatim. Your Honor, Mrs. Veronica Walsh is engaging in sophisticated psychological manipulation designed to undermine the mother-child relationship, Patricia argued. While she's not technically violating the letter of previous orders, she's absolutely violating their spirit and causing measurable emotional harm to the child. David Brennan, still representing Marcus, tried to minimize the evidence. Your Honor, these are normal step-family adjustment conversations. Mrs. Veronica Walsh is simply trying to help Emma navigate complex family dynamics. Judge Martinez cut him off sharply. Mr. Brennan, suggesting to a 12-year-old that her mother fought for custody out of spite rather than love is not helping her navigate anything. It's psychological manipulation, and this court warned against exactly this type of behavior. Marcus took the stand, looking defeated rather than defiant. Under Patricia's questioning, he admitted that Veronica had been discussing future custody possibilities and had made comments about me being overwhelmed by single parenthood. Did you participate in these conversations? Marcus admitted reluctantly. Sometimes. But I thought we were just talking about theoretical possibilities, not planning anything specific. Did you tell your wife these conversations were inappropriate, given the court's previous orders? Marcus squirmed in his seat. I didn't think they were harmful. Veronica cares about Emma and wants what's best for her. Mr. Walsh, did the court not specifically order you and your wife to attend co-parenting counseling to address appropriate boundaries? Yes, but we completed those sessions 2 years ago, and yet here we are again with the same issues. Do you see the problem? When Veronica took the stand, her demeanor was completely different from 3 years earlier. Gone was the confident maternal persona. Instead, she appeared defensive and calculated, measuring each word carefully. Mrs. Walsh, did you tell Emma her mother only fought for custody to hurt her father? Patricia asked directly. I may have suggested that divorce can make parents act emotionally rather than logically. That's not what I asked. Did you tell Emma her mother fought for custody to hurt her father? I was trying to help Emma understand that adult decisions are complex. By undermining her relationship with her mother? By helping her think critically about her situation? Judge Martinez interrupted. Mrs. Walsh, Emma is 12 years old. She doesn't need to think critically about custody decisions made by courts and adults. She needs to feel secure in her family relationships. The questioning continued for an hour, with Veronica's answers becoming increasingly contradictory. She claimed to support Emma's relationship with me, while simultaneously
admitting to conversations that clearly undermined it. She insisted her suggestions about high schools and living arrangements were hypothetical discussions, while acknowledging she'd contacted Emma's dance instructor about schedule changes. The most revealing moment came when Patricia asked about Emma's emotional state. Have you noticed Emma seems more anxious lately? She's becoming a teenager. Anxiety is normal. Did it occur to you that your constant questioning about her living arrangements might be contributing to that anxiety? I'm helping her prepare for decisions she'll eventually need to make. She's 12, Mrs. Walsh. What decisions about custody does a 12-year-old need to prepare for? Veronica's pause was telling. Well, when she's older. So you are planning for a future custody change? I'm just thinking about what would be best for Emma long-term. Judge Martinez called a brief recess. When court resumed, her expression was stern. This case represents a troubling pattern of behavior that this court specifically addressed 3 years ago. Mrs. Veronica Walsh's continued attempts to position herself as Emma's primary parent figure, despite clear legal boundaries, demonstrate either willful disregard for court orders or inability to understand appropriate step-parent roles. She turned to address Veronica directly. Mrs. Walsh, your actions are causing documented emotional distress to a child. Your conversations about custody changes, your unauthorized contact with Emma's activity coordinators, and your systematic undermining of Emma's relationship with her mother constitute a form of emotional abuse. Veronica's face went pale, but Judge Martinez wasn't finished. The court finds that Mrs. Veronica Walsh's behavior violates the spirit and intent of previous orders regarding parental boundaries.
Therefore, effective immediately, Mrs. Veronica Walsh is prohibited from any unsupervised contact with Emma until she completes a court-approved parenting class specifically focused on step-parent boundaries and child psychology. Marcus jumped to his feet. "Your Honor, that means Emma can't visit our house." "That's correct, Mr. Walsh. Emma's visits with you will be supervised by a court-appointed monitor until your wife demonstrates she can interact with Emma appropriately. These supervised visits will take place at a neutral location." The implications were staggering. Marcus would lose his home visits with Emma, potentially for months, because of Veronica's behavior. Furthermore, Judge Martinez continued, Mrs. Veronica Walsh is ordered to undergo psychological evaluation to assess her understanding of appropriate boundaries with stepchildren. Any future violations will result in complete prohibition of contact with Emma. She looked at both Marcus and Veronica sternly. "Mr. Walsh, your enablement of this behavior is equally concerning. You are required to attend individual counseling to address why you've repeatedly failed to protect your daughter from psychological manipulation in your own household." As we left the courthouse, I felt a mixture of relief and sadness. Emma would be protected from Veronica's manipulation, but she would also be confused and hurt by the sudden change in her visitation schedule. That evening, explaining the court's decision to Emma was one of the hardest conversations I'd ever had to navigate as a parent. "Why can't I go to Dad's house anymore?" she asked, tears streaming down her face. "You can still see your father, sweetheart, but for a while, those visits will happen at a different place, with someone there to make sure everyone follows the rules." "What rules? What did I do wrong?" "You didn't do anything wrong, Emma. Sometimes adults make mistakes about how to treat children, and courts have to step in to fix those mistakes." "Is it because of what Veronica said about you only wanting custody to hurt Dad?" The fact that Emma remembered that specific comment so clearly showed how deeply Veronica's words had affected her. "Partly, yes. Adults shouldn't say things that make children worry about whether their parents really love them. Veronica said some things that weren't true and weren't fair to you." Emma was quiet for a long moment. "I always knew you really loved me, but sometimes when Veronica said those things, it made me feel confused inside." That's exactly why the judge made this decision. Children shouldn't have to feel confused about their parents' love. The supervised visitation began the following weekend at a family services center downtown. Emma seemed nervous about the new arrangement, but the monitor, a kind woman named Carol, helped ease the transition. Marcus appeared devastated by the restrictions, finally understanding the consequences of his years of passive enabling. After the first supervised visit, Emma came home more relaxed than she'd been in months.
"Dad seemed really sad," she reported, "but we played board games and talked about normal stuff instead of all those confusing questions Veronica always asks." Over the following weeks, Emma's anxiety decreased noticeably. She stopped asking worried questions about whether I really wanted her around. Her sleep improved, and she regained enthusiasm for dance and school activities. 2 months later, Marcus called to inform me that he and Veronica were separating. "I finally understand what she was doing," he said quietly. "The counselor helped me see how I let her manipulate Emma because I wanted to believe she just loved our family. But she was trying to replace you, and I helped her do it." Marcus moved into an apartment in Tempe, closer to our neighborhood. Without Veronica's influence, our co-parenting relationship began to heal for the first time since their marriage. 6 months after the emergency hearing, Marcus petitioned the court to lift the supervision requirements, demonstrating through counseling records and changed behavior that he could maintain appropriate boundaries. Emma, now 13 and more mature, had gained valuable perspective on the experience. "I'm glad Veronica isn't in my life anymore," she told me one evening while we worked on a science project together. "I thought I liked all her attention, but it made everything feel fake and stressful. I like just being a kid without worrying about which parent loves me more." 2 years later, as Emma prepared for high school, she brought up the custody battles during one of our regular evening conversations. "Mom, I want you to know that even when I was confused about some things Veronica said, I always knew this was my real home, and you were my real mom.
I just didn't know how to tell you that without hurting Dad's feelings. Looking at my 15-year-old daughter, confident and secure in her identity and family relationships, I felt grateful for every difficult decision I'd made to protect her. The custody battles had been emotionally and financially draining, but they'd preserved something irreplaceable: Emma's right to a childhood free from adult manipulation and her secure attachment to the mother who had loved her from the moment she was born. Sometimes the hardest part of being a parent isn't providing for your child's physical needs. It's protecting their emotional well-being from adults who claim to love them, but use that love as a weapon. Emma deserved better, and ultimately the legal system recognized that truth and protected her right to simply be a child in a stable, loving home. Looking for more? We've got 2 amazing stories ready for you right on screen. If this one touched you, these are absolutely worth your time. Click to watch them now. And hey, subscribe and hit that bell to never miss our latest uploads.